So for some people, they're going to be very familiar with this as it stands. It might be something that people don't have a full awareness of. We're not going to go into great detail, a very high overview, really with an emphasis of why validation should be your friend when you are working, and it shouldn't be a burden that you have to kind of live with. So we're just going to spend the next little while going over about LabKey limbs validation, how we frame it through a GAMP5 lens. That's the methodology that we use. Um, how that sort of fits when you have a SaaS environment. For some of the old school people, the days of sticking a CD in a computer and running your installer and watching it go are long gone. Taking screen captures of every button are long gone. But of course, that does mean what methodologies do we now use, and how does that fit with a cloud environment? And also, what are regulators expecting to see? Um, can you remain audit ready pretty much all the time? And how can LabKey and us help you achieve that? So very, very high level. Before we go any further, it's worth taking a moment just to align on what we mean by validation. So it's one of those words that gets used a lot, sometimes interchangeably with testing, documentation, and it can create a bit of confusion. It's not just about running tests. Here's my list of tests that I've run, I'm validated. No, it's about creating confidence. Can I, at the end of my validation process, go, the system does what I need it to do, and it does it in a reliable and consistent way. Every time you come out of validation, you should have that nice glowing feeling that my system does really what I need it to do. In terms of what validation or the overall process, it's fairly straightforward. What are you going to do and how are you going to do it? This is an important step because trying to approach validation of every single system is a fool's errand. And I think anyone who's trying to do that will realize that how difficult that is. Some systems are so simple that validation could be a few pages, a few documents piece. Some validation pieces are so complex, it can take a year to get in because they really do require that level. Truthfully, most fall somewhere between those two extremes. But having that strong validation plan of what you want to do and how you're going to do it saves so many problems down the road. Next thing is do it. Now, how you do it, again, based very much on your validation plan, but generally speaking, it will involve some kind of testing. If you're really lucky, you're working with a vendor who provides documentation that you can lean on, which really will help support your process. And just making sure that everything you've just said you're going to do has been met and meets the aims of that task had. And finally, it's verify that you did it. Go back through final checklist. Have I done everything? Have my goals been met? Is the system what I mean it to do? A rather frivolous example I sometimes use for those who are kind of wondering what this looks like in practice. A classic example is saying, I would love to have a spreadsheet that calculates all these wonderful numbers for me. And then you go and buy Microsoft Word and you try and do the same thing. Now, if you were to validate Microsoft Word in terms of does it do what Microsoft say it's going to do? Yeah, pass every time. Then you try and use it for your process, doesn't work. So really building in what do you need to do is absolutely vital to that validation piece. And that should be the thing you settle on at the beginning. And that's where the say what you're going to do really comes in, because you need to know what you're aiming for. In terms of what we mean by software validation, pretty much, as you just said, is documented evidence that the system does do what you want it to do. And again, the intended use is really, really important, because you may, but I've seen it before, you have slightly poorly defined requirements. You find out that you end up with a system that you don't want. So that early planning of what do we need to do? What is our process? What is our workflow? Absolutely vital. Once you know you've got a piece of software that does what you need to do, it's making sure that it's robust. Does it have good data integrity? Is everything traceable within that system? Can you look back and go, I see, last Thursday, John did this process and that was the result he got. And I know he did that because it's all there in a nice, easy to read audit trail. Why this matters in a SaaS environment is you will see now that software does not sit still. in the old days of buying a software version that you would run for 5 years and it would barely ever change beyond a couple of configurations, they're just not there anymore. Cloud does push updates constantly. You may end up, as in the case with LabKey, you may end up with a slower release cycle for more regulated users, but the truth is change does happen. And that's great. The GAMP5 steering committee, the intention was never that you would stick with the same software. You would always want to be on the latest stuff. You want those bugs to be fixed. You want that new features that can really make you a strong difference to your workflow. But of course, you've got to do it with the context of control. So while you're going through your validation process, have you built in that ability to react to these SaaS updates? And this is where working with a good quality vendor who can help you out with the documentation, updates, a regular process update really will help maintain your validated state. In terms of what the key principles are, again, really reiterating again, clear intended use and scope, documented requirements. Now, documented requirements can come in a whole range, but ultimately you have to describe what you want it to do. Evidence. Now, again, evidence can be quite broad. Sometimes you may just have a fairly lightweight CSA style scripting in which you just go in there, run a few workflows and go, this is enough for the level of risk of the system that we have. Or it may be 20 documents, testing every nook and cranny because it's a really high risk, probably maybe even a system that you built yourself. There really is that broad range of what evidence do you need to provide, and really having that understanding of what level of risk does my system bring to the process would help you decide what kind of level of evidence do you need. Audit trails, access and security, of course, are fairly standard things that everyone comes to expect now in these systems. The audit trails, I think we've all seen, are for better or for worse sometimes, but the fact that you do need some way to know exactly historically what happened in your system, and validation would help you demonstrate that. And finally, making sure your documentation is available. No point in doing the greatest doc validation in the history of mankind and not having it available to inspectors, because they're going to want to see that. Apologies. Who needs validation? It might be broader than you think. I mean, obviously, people working in manufacturing, they're going to need to validate. However, they're very tightly controlled. But even as you move away from that environment, you may find that your regulatory body does require validation. I have seen in some industries as well, the regulations, while they do talk about validation, they often don't give guidance. They might just say it needs to be validated, and you're kind of on your own to figure out what that needs. But generally speaking, anyone operating on some kind of GXP process will generally have a framework they have to fit into. Anyone responsible for data integrity audit records will need to validate this. If you're a fairly small team and you're moving into controlled environments, getting a validation and quality process in there early is generally better than getting big and trying to retroactively fit that into your model. You are literally building quality into you as you grow as an organization. So considering validation early, it's not meant to be a burden. It's meant to be a guiding principle that lets you grow and expand and know that you will always have control of your process. It's all about control. It's all about confidence in your system. And finally, teams with external or internal validation requirements, particularly if you're working with a CRO, if they've outsourced to you, the CRO themselves will probably be highly regulated. So there's a good chance that they would expect you to be regulated as well, to be validated as well, and essentially work to the same standard that they operate to. Example of regulated drivers, there's a good chance you've seen some of these before. But as soon as kind of you begin to touch into these sort of regulations, there's a really good chance that you're going to consider validation as a next step. And why does it matter? Again, we kind of touched on this already, but ultimately it's meant to make your process better. I have the confidence. And in the event that anything ever does happen, ever does go wrong, because things do, you know that you have all the evidence and testing and processes behind you to demonstrate that you did everything you could to prevent any issues occurring. It gives you confidence that when I run that report, I can trust that report. When I gather my data from my instrument, I trust that data from my instrument. You're never worrying about, is this going to be good enough? And supporting your validation activities, of course, you have a full-blown quality management system, which is this is the backbone through which runs through validation, of making sure that everything I do is done because we want to make sure that quality is built into what we do. Quick run through of the main components. Classic example, validation plan, say what you're going to do. Requirements, same sort of thing. I want to verify these. And risk assessment. Assessing risk actually runs out throughout the entire cycle. First thing you're going to do is when you buy a new system is assess it for risk. Does this impact my critical systems in any way? If I am buying some software that kind of helps me prettify my emails, do you know what? I'm not going to bother validating this one. If I'm buying a system that is going to control my entire manufacturing process, you're going to want to validate that. So the first thing you do is, what level of risk does this system give me? Once the decision to validate has been made, you perform further risks on, okay, within this system, what risks are there? Not all risks are equal. Like the classic saying, once everyone's special, nobody is. Same kind of thing. When everything's high risk, nothing is. So this will really give you the opportunity to look at your system and go, right, where do I need to focus my testing? What are the absolute critical pieces that I should be focusing on? And all the smaller stuff, like if I enter a date into the data field, does it stay as a date? Which you would trust your vendor to kind of make sure that that was the case. You would ignore those. You would really look at the high risk stuff that would really, really affect your workflow if it did not operate as expected. Then you have the testing activities. We are using here the slightly older terms of IQ, CQ, OQ, PQ. GAMP5, which is the methodology we try to follow, or we do follow, but there's a lot of movement within GAMP5, is moving away from these terms, mainly because you end up having a half-hour conversation of where should a particular piece of testing fit. Ultimately, as long as you've got that, it doesn't really matter what you call it. But we do use these terms of case of, is a system installed? Is it configured? Does it operate as what the vendor says it's going to do? Does it do what I need it to do? Traceability. The traceability matrix is actually a very important document. It's easy to sort of dismiss as just this thing to link. It's really fundamental in showing that what you are doing actually has value. If you find you're building tests out that you cannot link to a requirement anymore, it's a chance to step back and go, do I need this test? If I've written 20 steps and I can't link them to a single requirement, there's a good chance that they were assessed as low risk or not having any impact, and I don't need to spend time doing that. So the trace matrix is a really, really good method of reining yourself in, making sure that you don't wander off course and test things that just are not relevant. And finally, summary and closure. This is the showing you did what you did. There's my report. Here's my results. Here's any outstanding issues that I may have. Here's any issues that I hit. This is how I dealt with it. And this is why I have confidence that this system operates as expected. In terms of what we offer, and we offer this in partnership with LabKey, we offer a 2-level support. The first one is the baseline Val pack. This is effectively what you consider to be the OQ testing, in which we go in there and we demonstrate the nuts and the bolts of the system operate as you would expect. We demonstrate sample types can create source types, your lineage, your storage, your assays, your workflows, all the kind of nuts and bolts testing that you would normally consider doing. We do that for you. We then we offer a second service separately, in which we can come in and show that your specific configuration or your specific needs have been met. Generally speaking, start with your SOP, show where your SOP touches LabKey, and demonstrate that LabKey can be configured and can operate in a way that meets your business needs. In terms of the what's included for the level 1 support, we offer you a pre-built validation plan, requirements, risk assessment, traceability, and the testing. For a phase two, what we call a phase two, which will be the customer testing, we can go in there and offer you a bespoke level of testing around your operational requirements. Why does this matter? The OQ can be big and it can be a lot. I think you also know just how complex LabKey is. There's a lot of options in there. We can kind of help you hit the ground running much, much quicker by giving you an out-of-the-box OQ verification. The PQ piece then should be much, much smaller because you focus on what do I need to do, not all this additional testing of does actually LabKey operate as we expect. That's all being dealt with for you. In terms of scope, the valve pack is currently available for LabKey Sample Manager and LabKey LIMS. It is a combined pack because there's so much overlap between the two, and it's clearly marked whether something is Sample Manager only or LIMS only. In terms of release cadence, the digital validation pack we offer, I say digital because we now offer it through a digital validation tool called ValKit, and we actually get 3 releases per year. If you're not on the LTS release cycle, the sort of release cycle, that's different. The LabKey, the Valve pack doesn't cover that. This is very much for the slower releases to give you that breathing space to kind of get a new release, look at the new release, make sure you're happy with it, use it before the next one comes. And you say we get 3 releases per year. When we do a release, we always release an impact assessment. Essentially, what's been released in this year? What do we need to focus our testing on? So even at that initial stage, we are filtering out what's not important. For example, if they say we are changing our branding font from blue to a lovely Dayglow green or something, we wouldn't test that, no point. We would mark it as a change, but we're going to say that's out of scope of validation. Or we may find that we do have a change, and it impacts an existing requirement. We may find we have a change that's a brand new set of requirements. And so we make that assessment in the MPIT assessment. Based on the IA, we then go through and update documents, update any testing, any requirements, do the testing and release it as a brand new pack. And then just to sort of kind of go over what I was meaning by phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1, function testing, the nuts and bolts of how LabKey works. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. And the phase 2, workflow testing, does it do what you need it to do? Again, we kind of try to keep away from that classic IQ, OQ, PQ kind of verbiage and make it very clear that there's 2 very distinct. I think that's about my time, so I'm just going to move on to Q&A, I think. Please let us know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in chat or Q&A, and we can get to them. Given sort of the time, I think we'll get moving for the next presentation. But thank you so much, Richard, for joining in your evening as well.